Chapter 29. What is certainty? Karasura, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Quote, the Chinese cannot help thinking that the octave has 5 notes. The more necessary anything appears to my mind, the more certain it is that I only assert a limitation. I slept with faith and found a corpse in my arms on awakening. I drank and danced all night with doubt and found her a virgin in the morning. End quote. The Book of Lies. I wouldn't start to argue with the Chinese if I were you. They might remind you that you exude the stench peculiar to corpses. Again, that other hymn to St. Thomas, as I ought perhaps to have called it. Quote, doubt, doubt thyself, doubt even if thou doubtest thyself, doubt all, doubt even if thou doubtest all. It seems sometimes as if beneath all conscious doubt there lay some deepest certainty. Oh, kill it, slay the snake. The horn of the doubt god be exalted. Dive deeper, ever deeper, into the abyss of mind until thou unearth the fox that, on hounds, yoicks, tally ho. Bring that to bay. Then win the mort. End quote. Once more, what a book that is. I never realized it until now. It says, see that double page at the onset, one with the question mark and the other with the exclamation point, alone upon the blank. Moreover, you should read the long essay, The Soldier and the Hunchback. But every one of those, rather significant, slides into a rhapsody of exaltation, a dithyram, a paean. No good here. For what you want is a penny plain pedestrian prose probability percentage. You want to know what the odds are when I say certain. A case for casuistry? At least for classification. It depends rather on one's tone of voice. Yes, of course. And as to the classification, off we jog to the divine Pymander, who saw and stated the quiddity of our query with his accustomed lucidity. He discerns 3 degrees of truth, and he distinguishes accordingly. 1. True. 2. Certain without error. 3. Of all truth. Clear enough, the difference between 1 and 2. Ask me the time. I say 2:30, and that's true enough. But the astronomer royal is by no manner of means satisfied with any approximation of that kind. He wants it accurate. He must know the longitude to the second. He must have decided what method of measuring time is to be used. He must make corrections for this and for that. And he must have attached an arbitrary interpretation to the system. The whole question of relativity pops up. And, even so, he will enter a caveat about every single ganglion in the gossamer of his calculations. Well, then, all this intricate differentiation and integration and verification, and Lord knows what leads at last to a statement which we may call certain without error. But Hermes Trismegistus is not content with any such figures as the astronomer. However cunning and colossal his Orton, his 3rd degree demands much more than this. The astronomer's estimate has puttied every tiniest crack. He concedes it, but then waves it brusquely away. All the time the door is standing wide open. The astronomer's exquisitely tailored figure stands in abashed isolation, like a gawky young man at his first ball. He feels that he doesn't belong. For this D.S.T. or Greenwich or whatnot, however exact in itself, is so only in reference to some other set of measurements which themselves turn out to be arbitrary. It is not of any ultimate import. Nobody can dispute it, but it simply doesn't matter to anybody, apart from the particular case. It is not, quote, of all truth, end quote. What Hermes means by this, it will be well to inquire. May we call it a truth of religion? Don't be shocked. The original word implies a binding together again, as in a body of doctrine. Compare the word ligature. It was only later, by corruption, that the word came to imply piety, religions, attentive to the gods, as opposed to negligens, neglectful. I think that Hermes was contemplating a Rosh closely knitted together and anchored by incessant aspiration to the supernal triad. Just such a one, in short, as appears in those remarks on the magical memory, a god man ready to discard his well worn instrument for a new one, brought up to date with all the latest improvements. The movement of the zeitgeist during his past incarnation, in particular, well wrought and ready for his use. This being so, a truth which is, quote, of all truth, end quote, should mean any proposition which forms an essential part of this coup, this magical identity of a man. Now, how curious it must appear at the first glance to note that the truths of this order should prove to be what we call axioms, or even platitudes. The more certain I am of anything, the more certain it is that I am only asserting a limitation of my own mind. Very good, but what am I to do about it? Some, at least, of such certainties must surely be of all truth. The test of admission to this class ought to be that, if one were to accept the contradictory of the proposition, the entire structure of the mind would be knocked to pieces, as is not at all the case with the astronomer's determination, which may turn out to be wrong for a dozen different reasons without anybody getting seriously wounded in his tenderest feelings. The statesman knows instinctively, or at worst, by his training and experience, what sort of assertion, harmless enough on the surface, may be dangerous thinking, a death blow to his own idea of what is of all truth, and strikes out wildly in a panic entirely justifiable from his own point of view. Exhibit number one, Galileo and that lot. What could it possibly matter to the gospel story that people should think that the earth moves around the sun? Riemann and such a lot of things have shown that it didn't and doesn't. This sort of truth is only a set of conventions. Oh, don't gas away like this. I want to know what to do about it. Am I to accept this caterwauling gamont and enlarge my mind and call it an initiation? Or am I to nail my own of all truth tonic sulfa to the mast and go down into the maelstrom of insanity with colors flying? Do you really need masked bands to lull baby to sleep? The master of the temple deals very simply and efficiently with problems of this kind. The mind, says he, of this party of the first part, hereinafter referred to as Frater N, or whatever his eighth degree equals 3 motto may be, is so constructed that the interval from C to C is most harmoniously divided into notes. That of the party of the second part, hereinafter referred to as not a heretic, an atheist, a bolshi, a diehard, a schismatic, an anarchist, a black magician, a friend of Aleister Crowley, or whatever may be the current term of abuse. Mr. A, Lord B, the Duke of C, Mrs. X, or whatever he or she may chance to be called, into 5. The structure called of all truth in neither of us is affected in the least, any more than in the reading of a thermometer with Fahrenheit on one side and centigrade on the other. You naturally object that this answer is little better than an evasion, that it automatically pushes the gamut question outside the charmed of all truth circle. No, it doesn't really. For if you were able to put up a projection of those two minds, there would be, firstly, some sort of compensation elsewhere than in the musical section, and secondly, some truth of a yet higher order which is common to both. Not unaware am I that these conceptions are at first exceedingly difficult to formulate clearly. I wouldn't go so far as to say that one would have to be a master of the temple to understand them, but it is really very necessary to have grasped firmly the doctrine that, quote, a thing is only true insofar as it contains its contradiction in itself, end quote. A good way to realize this is by keeping up a merry dance of paradoxes, such as infest logic and mathematics. The repeated butting of the head against a brick wall is bound in the long run to shake up the little gray cells, teach you to distrust any train of argument, however apparently impeccable the syllogisms, and to seek ever more eagerly the dawn of the nishamic consciousness where all these things are clearly understood, although impossible to express in rational language. The prime function of intellect is differentiation. It deals with marks, with limits, with the relations of what is not identical. In Nishama, all this work has been carried out so perfectly that the rough working has passed clean out of the mind. Just so, you say, I, as if it were an indivisible unity, unconscious of the inconceivably intricate machinery of anatomical, physiological, psychological construction which issues in this idea of I. We may then, with some confidence, reaffirm that our certainties do assert our limitations, but this kind of limitation is not necessarily harmful, provided that we view the situation in its proper perspective, that we understand that membership of the of all truth class does not, as one is apt to think at first sight, deepen the gulfs which separate mind from mind, but on the contrary, put us in a position to ignore them. Our acts of love under will, which express our devotion to Nuit, which multiply the fulfillments of our possibilities, become continually more efficacious and more closely bound up with our formula of initiation. And we progressively become aware of deeper and vaster images of the all truth class, which reconcile by including within themselves all apparent antimonies. It is certain without error that I ought to go to bed. Love is the law, love under will, fraternally.